Hey, everybody. My name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ Film Festival. This is our 35th anniversary year. We've had some amazing programs. Thanks for everybody who came out and watched us in person, watched us online. The shorts program, Latin Extraordinary, played last Tuesday, the 27th, and is now streaming until October the 9th. It was tremendously well received, and I'm very, very happy that we have one of the filmmakers with us tonight, Oscar Perez-Chairez of the film Hijo, which actually he was here last week for the festival, and now he's talking to us tonight. So we have double Oscars. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so
Um,
much for having me.
so tell me a little bit about Iho and how the film came about.
Yeah, so Hijo was really inspired by my dad's experiences with trying to assimilate once he came to the United States when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
He came from Mexico and he came straight to Austin, Texas, where I was born and raised. And he just told me that it was really hard for him to fit in, even though there was a community of Latinos, specifically Mexicans, here in Austin. There was a really big kind of tension between Mexicans that were born in America and Mexicans that were born in Mexico.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard for my dad to kind of find his footing, but he eventually found people who like accepted him, people who were from Mexico and some people who were Mexican Americans who spoke Spanish because that's the only language he knew.
Yeah.
And This was his way of kind of surviving in the space because he faced a lot of violence, like physical violence, for being an immigrant from other Mexicans. But his parents didn't like this. They went through a lot to come to the United States, and seeing him rapidly change his clothes, the way he spoke, and who he hung around with, it concerned them. And out of their concern, they told him, you can't change. We don't want you to change. And this was a big conflict for my dad growing up. It was like balancing keeping his parents proud and doing what his parents thought that he should be doing,
Mhm.
and doing what he needed to find a place to fit in, socially, culturally, and for surviving, because if he didn't assimilate, then he faced real physical, violent consequences for it.
Was this something that your father was hesitant to talk about, or did he keep a lot of it in, or was he willing to talk
Um,
about this with
I
certain
think he was really open with talking about it with me. Like I'm the oldest of his children,
yeah.
and he's very frank with me. I remember growing up, I would see photos of him, and he would kind of be look in a certain way, and I would ask him like, like what, who the fuck are you? And then he told me, and his story, it really resonated with me. I never judged him for it. I really, you know, was really empathetic to his experiences, and it was almost universal. Like his struggle to fit in, the struggle between these two kind of cultures, resisting one another. And it really spoke to me, and it's something that I had always wanted to kind of put into film format.
Yeah.
And this combined with growing up and experiences, and being queer, um, one of my big goals with this film, with the queer aspect, and with the whole Mexican assimilating into American culture aspect, specifically regionally in Austin, Texas, and like a border state, was I really wanted to kind of emulate the kind of film that would have resonated with my dad at the time, right? So when you think of Latinos in cinema, it's always stereotyped. It's nothing quite culturally relevant to them. And so I wanted to make a film that kind of would be there for my dad, people like my dad, people like myself. And that's why it has this kind of nostalgic look to it. I wanted to emulate what it would look like had it came out in the year that my dad was going through all this.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So when did you decide to make this, and how long did it take to make this?
Yeah, so like I said, I wanted to tell the story for a long time, like since I was like a teenager.
Yeah.
But I really hunkered down to make this film with my producer, writer, DP, and colorist Randy Cabrera. We started in, I think it was June of last year, late June of last year is when we started writing it. And by the time August rolled around, we had like a full script, and then we started casting.
Yeah.
And we were just casting and rehearsing throughout the rest of 2021, and we shot in January of this year of 2022. So
Wow.
it was a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
We worked really really hard, and like a lot of the extra steps to make the film were kind of cut because Randy and I took on multiple roles. Like I'm the film's, you know, co-writer, director,
Hmm.
editor, and excuse me, a producer. You know, I also assisted with coloring and like all the job roles that Randy did, and we really worked with like a small crew. You know, part of our philosophy behind making the film, but yeah, it took us like what, like from June till like we pretty much got locked picture in March. And we've been adding in, you know, new sound cuts, new music, you know, intermittently throughout the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a pretty quick turnaround because we just were like, you know, we didn't want to wait on a grant, we didn't want to wait for permission, and we were just like, fuck it, we'll just do this shit ourselves.
Exactly. So in the film, a teenage Mexican immigrant slowly tries to assimilate into American culture, struggling with
Mhm.
his identity and his mother's growing approval of his change. Obviously, what's so great about this film is that it does all those things, but really, you know, deals with, the central characters coming out, all the inner turmoil he's facing, as well as, his relationship with his mother. Can you
Mhm.
describe the relationship with his mother?
Yeah, so one of the goals in making this film was like I said, when you think of Latino cinema, specifically Mexican cinema,
Yeah.
as it pertains, you know, to the United States, it's really not anything culturally relevant to them. It's always like Dia de los Muertos or like just something really easy for like white people to be like, that's like Mexican, right? And like something that really kind of resonated with us was how our parents, our relationship with our parents, kind of informs what we do and who we are.
Hmm.
And like, there's like a certain culture with parenting in Mexican culture that kind of transcends borders because even when people come over here and you know they're a couple generations in, like it still kind of repeats itself. This kind of really um, like toxic, abusive relationship you have with your parents. But it's not as, you know, black and white as that might sound to most people. It's like, oh, the abusive, they suck. It's like, no, like you love your parents and they love you. But there's just kind of a disconnect as it, you know, and when it comes to communication.
Hmm.
Like in the film, you know, Javier and Alma, they're both right, you know. They're both right and they're both wrong. You know, they like a lot of their conflict stems from their failure to listen to one another. But for that to work, it has to be mutual, right? So, you know, even when one person is trying to see eye to eye with the other person, if the other person isn't having it, then it just won't work out. And this is kind of a really common thing in like Mexican culture.
Hmm.
You know, whether you have immigrant parents or whether you have American parents, it just kind of gets passed down to you. You know, you never really fully learn how to communicate effectively with loved ones, and you kind of end up repeating that. But yeah, like the basis of it was my dad's conflict with his mom. You know, like his mom didn't believe him that the reason he came home bloody and the reason he got into a fight at school was because of his clothes. She's like, "What the fuck? What do you mean it's your clothes?" Sorry, it's Penny. She's like,
Yeah.
she wants to say hi, but it's she. You know, she didn't believe him. Like, why didn't you like? You're bullshitting me. Like, you're here to finish school and make it out and be financially well. That's like the whole fucking point of being here. I'm not, you're not here to make friends or like fit in. Like that's not your priority. And because, you know, the way parents are gets kind of repeated through generations in Mexican culture. A lot of the stuff that he went through with his parents, yeah, I went through a lot with my parents, you know, granted different situations, but it's there.
You mentioned that Latinos in cinema have not always had fully dimensional representation. What do you think that is?
Um, the film industry is just really white,
Yeah.
and like I think it's like a cultural problem like white people have where they think that the listening that they do is like enough, or kind of pandering is like enough. And like, I mean, it can be nice, you know, not saying, you know, it isn't nice to like have like a nice, family friendly, children friendly, film, animated or live action, that's about Latinos. But
Mhm.
it doesn't really go anywhere beyond like they're just Latino, right? It's like you could tell that same story essentially with like white people in the place of the Mexicans. And so like I think, lots of reasons, economically, socially, just like the industry itself, there's a lot of barriers that prevent Latinos from kind of having the resources to do it themselves because no one can tell like a racial or ethnic group story better than they. And
Mhm.
if you're not part of that, group, then like you better care a lot. Um,
Exactly.
and like in the end, that's something that we kind of faced with making this film. Like we tried to reach out to grants and it was pretty funny. Like each grant that we applied to, they're like, this is really new and diverse, but sorry, no money. I was like, what the hell? Like, why am I even applying in the first place? Like, what is
Exactly.
it that you're looking for? And so, and like, it's pretty funny because like I was telling Randy during pre-production, I was like, my goal as a director was to emulate what this film would look like had it come out in 1996. But in a lot of ways, the circumstances in which the film was made also emulated what it would have been like in that time period too. Like, one Mexican, one Dominican trying to make this film. No one's
Mhm.
gonna support it. And like at that point, all right, we have two choices. Either you make the film as best as you can with the knowledge that you have and like being very kind of um, mindful about your resources, or just not telling the story at all. And for us, it's a no-brainer. It's like, I'd rather make this with like sticks and like gum and duct tape than to just not have this story out in the world.
Exactly. You mentioned that it was a priority for you to have this film as a period piece. What were the challenges of making it as a period piece?
Whew, period pieces are expensive as fuck, man. They're pricey. Uh, and like another reason why I wanted to like tell this story specifically in this time period, to stay authentic to my dad's experiences. And it's part of the reason why. Well, it's the reason why everything's in Spanish.
Yeah.
And I I don't know how familiar you are with like the geographical politics and stuff of Austin and East Austin, but Austin's one of the most segregated cities in the United States. Like it's literally divided down the middle by a highway, and I lived on the east side of the highway in East Austin, and that place. There's not a lot of economic prosperity. Schools aren't really great. The buildings are old and shitty. But that's not really like the mainstream conscious when you think of Austin. You think like, oh, like, keep Austin weird and like Willie Nelson. But like to us, that's not what Austin is, right? To us, Austin is like a very different thing with its own identity. And as rough as the upbringing there may be, it's home, right? It's like where we lived our lives, where we raised families, where we come of age. And like I wanted to capture East Austin like right now before it kind of goes away completely, because there's a lot of gentrification in the part where I grew up. Like you have like those bland gentrifier houses, like where my grandma lives over there. It's like an old house like built in the 50s, and down the street they're like buying properties up like crazy,
Mhm.
tearing them down, and building these new houses. And it gets harder and harder to maintain living there because of property
Exactly.
taxes, and it's really fucking hard. Even if you push outward northeast, it's still pretty expensive, and it's kind of becoming unlivable in terms of like for a working class family. And but like despite this rapid gentrification, there's still a lot of East Austin that still stands, right? Like there's a lot of houses that are still like the ones built in the 50s that are still there, right? The school that we shot at, that's Reagan High School. That's where my mom and dad went to high school in the 90s, and like
Yeah.
that's hasn't been changed. You know, probably because of neglect of the city. But one of the challenges was like, all right, like how do we tell a period piece and stay true to this time period when there's gentrifier houses everywhere? There's like buildings that didn't used to be there.
Mhm.
Everyone's driving around 2012 Hyundais. Like, how do we work around this? But like for someone like me who like knows the space really, really well, it's like, oh, like I know how we can make this feel like awesome without, exposing that this show shot in 2022.
That's great. Can you talk about where you are in your festival run and what it's like to see this film with an audience, especially after the last couple of years where so much has been virtual?
Yeah, so we're really early in our festival run. This is Out on Film is our second festival. Yeah, first LGBTQ festival, which is really really nice. And it's really nice to see it in theaters. Like it's especially like coming from film as like the editor, where I've seen it like a bunch of times, more than like anyone will ever see it. It's nice to see it in a theater because like that's where movies are meant to be
Yeah.
seen, and that's one of the things that we kept in mind. Like I think in the digital age we're so accustomed to seeing films on like a smaller screen, but it's really easy to forget that like these things are meant to be seen blown up, like like 100 feet across. Like it's supposed to be seen big, and that's
Yeah.
something that we kept in mind. And when we were like doing quality control checks and like looking back at cuts, we always did it on like the biggest screen we had possible, because it's like like it's we have to know what it feels like in a theater, right? Like, and at this point it was already 2022, so it's like they're gonna be in person, so we got to know how this shit looks like on a big screen. And it's been really nice. The response to it has been really really nice, specifically from like Latinos and Mexicans. It's been
Yeah.
really really nice to be like, holy shit, like my mom used to call me that too. And it's like, I'm sorry, but I'm really happy that you can relate.
So, have you given any thought to, was this always meant to be a short? Have you given any thought to maybe trying to expand it into a feature?
Yeah, this short actually, was I've always wanted to tell this in a feature film format.
Yeah.
And like the plan was like, okay, this short will be a proof of concept. And so we kind of worked backwards. I knew everything that kind of wanted to happen in a feature film, but it's like, okay, like how do we take apart pieces of it
Yeah.
to kind of fit this short film format? Because like the short film format is like such a different format from the feature film. There's certain things that you just cannot get away with in the short film format. um but yeah, it is, the plan is that like this is the proof of concept for the feature, because like the 33 minutes that this film is, the short is, it's like 33 minutes of like the whole feature. Like for
Yeah.
the feature I want to get into the more nuanced aspects of like his relationship with his other friends, and how they live their lives, and how they find themselves fitting into American culture. But yeah, like there's currently writing different drafts of the feature film to make that possible soon.
That's great. Please keep us posted.
For sure.
The shorts program is called Latin Extraordinary. Again, it played in person last week at Idle Film. It's
Hmm.
now streaming through October 9th. If you missed it, it's an extraordinary program, so please watch it. Um, Oscar, your film Hijo was very, very popular, both in person and streaming. So thank you for sharing your film with us, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's This experience at this festival has been really really great. Thank you
I'm
so
great. We're
much.
glad to hear that. We look forward to having you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.